Hello and welcome. You're watching Coronavirus Facts vs. Myths. I'm Rishika Barua. Amid the raging debate on booster shots and whether booster shots should be given or not given, amid the debate over vaccinating all versus giving better protection for few, the United States FDA has approved offering booster doses of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine to senior citizens and other high-risk groups. The FDA authorization is currently for Americans who are 65 and older, for younger people with underlying health conditions, and those people in jobs that put them at a high risk of COVID-19. Now, the new ruling represents a drastically scaled-back version from what the Biden administration had recommended. Remember, the Biden administration had put in place a sweeping plan to give a third dose to nearly all American adults in order to shore up their protection amid the spread of the highly contagious Delta variant. Now, the CDC is set to meet tomorrow to finalize the plan of action based on the FDA recommendation. Remember, this is a crucial recommendation coming in at a time when the deaths due to COVID-19 have been high in the United States, particularly among the unvaccinated. Dr. Aisha Dwivedi, Assistant Professor of Medicine, Lenox Hill Hospital, joins us from the United States. Thanks very much, Dr. Dwivedi, for speaking with us. US FDA has approved booster shots for the Pfizer vaccine only for 65 and above and those who are at a higher risk. Now, this is as many are saying, a dramatic climb down from what the Biden administration had recommended, isn't it?
Yes, Rishika, today the third shot of Pfizer, which is going to be the booster dose, has been approved by the FDA. Currently, it is approved, like you said, for ages over 65. We know that it's already been approved in the immunocompromised. Additionally, for people under the age of 65, those who are at higher risk for infections, either due to underlying health conditions or those who work in high-risk industries, especially healthcare workers, teachers, grocery store workers, are also eligible for the booster. I think the data so far shows that most of the breakthrough infection that we are seeing is in people who are elderly as well as those who are immunocompromised. So I think the pandemic continues to evolve. As we know, it's dynamic. So I think based on the data that was provided, that's what the FDA has recommended. The CDC is meeting tomorrow, and they will give the final stamp of approval. We're also going to get to know the details of who under 65 is exactly eligible, and they're probably going to tweak the recommendations a little bit, so I think we have to wait for that as well.
Right. But what's also very interesting, Doctor, is the fact that booster shots so far have been approved only for the Pfizer vaccine and not for Moderna and J&J. Why is that?
Yeah, great question. So like you said, there are some countries that are leading the way in boosters, especially Israel. And that's where most of the data that's being used in the United States as well is coming from. Pfizer is leading the race in getting the booster. I have heard that Moderna is in the process of getting the booster approved, and J&J have done studies but are awaiting the application for the approval. So I think with time, both J&J and Moderna will likely get approved for boosters. They're just, I think, a little bit behind in the process.
Right, and boosters have been approved, despite a WHO moratorium, and there are a dozen countries that have actually done it. But the World Health Organization continues to maintain that it is imperative to vaccinate more people around the world before giving boosters to a select few people in order for the pandemic to end.
Yep, I think we have to balance getting vaccinations to those who are not vaccinated, but also keeping those who are vaccinated safe from infections. And I think that's why right now we are not recommending, and FDA is not recommending boosters for everybody. They're selecting those few who are really at the highest risk so that the vaccinated do remain safe. So I think it's going to be a balancing game at the end of the day.
Right. And the high number of daily deaths that the United States is seeing, is that a reflection on the efficacy of the current vaccines?
I think this continues to be the pandemic of unvaccinated. We are seeing that majority of the people who are either severely ill or have died are unvaccinated. More than 90% of the hospital admissions, again, are in the unvaccinated. So while we have seen that the immunity does wane after 6 months, and that's why FDA has recommended the booster 6 months after the second dose of the Pfizer vaccine.
Right.
The breakthrough infections that we're seeing are relatively mild, and most of them are not requiring hospitalizations and are not severely ill. So I think the efficacy is strong. We can have faith in the vaccinations, but I think we have to continue to be cautious because the pandemic, as I said, is evolving and we're getting new data every day.
All right. Well, Dr. Aisha, thanks very much for joining us. The US FDA, they're making a recommendation for booster shots currently only for the Pfizer vaccine, and whether or not other vaccines are also going to be giving booster shots, that's a question that remains to be answered, but a significant climb down from what the Biden administration had planned in terms of booster shots. So we'll keep a close watch on those developments, but let's shift our focus now to the other big story that we're tracking. Now, the UK, as we all know, has released an updated travel advisory approving different formulations of the 4 listed vaccines, including India's Covishield. So now India's Covishield has been approved in the UK, but people travelling from India who were vaccinated with both doses of the Covishield will still need to quarantine for 10 days. This is home quarantine for 10 days. But what have the UK health officials given as a reason? They say that it's not the vaccine, but the vaccine certification which is a problem. Prime Minister Modi, very interestingly, at a vaccine summit, has now talked about the fact that there is a need for a mutual recognition of vaccine certifications in order to ease international travel. Now, many of you have asked questions on why has the UK approved Covishield but only from select few countries. 17 countries currently are also vaccinating their individuals, their population with Covishield. People from those 17 countries are allowed to enter the UK without any quarantine, but travellers from India are not. What is the difference between the coronavirus vaccine that is being manufactured in different parts of the world? If the vaccine formulation is the same, what is the difference between the AstraZeneca vaccine being manufactured here in India or the dose being manufactured in Europe vis-a-vis the dose that is being manufactured in the UK? To answer some of these critical questions, we have a panel of expert doctors. Dr. Ravindra Gupta, Professor of Clinical Microbiology, Department of Medicine, University of Cambridge, joins us from the UK. We also have Professor Polly Roy. She's a Professor of Virology from the Wellcome Trust, Senior Investigator at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And joining us from India, Professor Dr. Anita Ramesh Chandra. She's a Professor and HOD of Medical Oncology at the Apollo Hospital and also a specialist in clinical trials. Thank you all very much for being with us on NDTV. Dr. Polly Roy, I want to begin by asking you, one of the big questions that a lot of Indians are asking at the moment is that when the AstraZeneca vaccine from 17 countries is on a green list and those people do not need to quarantine in the UK, why is it that despite Covishield being approved, Indians coming from India, travellers coming in from India still need to quarantine in the UK?
Well, I think the problem is that although both vaccines are the same vaccines, really, because the vaccines developed in AstraZeneca, but this is manufactured in Pune, and the Serum Institute have well-established acknowledgement all over the world that they're very good. It's very good for vaccine manufacturing. So there is no difference between two vaccines. However, as you mentioned before, there may be problems of the certifications of the vaccines, and that every country do their certification of the vaccination is a different way. So the Indian certifications has to be according to what UK believe is the correct way. I don't know that. This is completely government decision. There's a vaccine-wise immune response for both vaccines exactly should be same. There's no difference in vaccines. So there is no controversy between these two different kind of vaccines. The controversy is the certification, as you mentioned before. So I think that this has to be solved between two different governments to understanding that what sort of certification will be essential that will allow everyone to go freely, travel one country to another country. So,
it's very interesting and very important, the clarification that you're giving, Professor Polly Roy, which is, crucial, that there is no difference in the vaccines, because Dr. Gupta, that was the longest question for, a question for the longest time. That is there a difference in the composition of the vaccine that is being manufactured, the same vaccine that is being manufactured in the UK or Europe or India, and that has been clarified that there is no difference. Why then is there a difference in the certification process, and is it time perhaps for us to do what the Indian Prime Minister is recommending at this moment, which is to recognize or develop a formula where the vaccine certification process is formalized or is the same all over the world?
Yes, I think this is really important. I think that this decision comes from a perception by the government potentially that forgery or fake certification is going to be more common in certain areas of the world, and that is a particular viewpoint that I don't really support, because there's plenty of technology in various places that can allow unvaccinated individuals to demonstrate they've been vaccinated. So I think this is an oversight and should be reconsidered urgently, because of course it's very discriminatory and it's also bad for the UK economy. We don't want to be disadvantaging students from India, for example. And yes, I think that the most obvious way around this is a global certification system, and the only way forward in terms of a sustainable way of verifying vaccination status is going to be a globalized system run through a central agency. And without that, we have the problem of a long-term disruption to travel, because, of course, vaccination status is going to be an issue for some years to come.
Right. Dr. Anita Ramesh Chandra, explain to our viewers, and this is something that has raised once again doubts in the minds of viewers. We still know that only Covishield, for instance, has been approved in most countries. Covaxin hasn't even been approved by the WHO. Those who are vaccinated with Covaxin, for instance, still are subject to significant amount of travel restrictions across most parts of the world. Is this a question mark on the safety and efficacy of vaccines? Because many people are actually, inhibited by these kind of rules and regulations.
Yes, what I feel personally is that there should be a global process of vaccine manufacturing, vaccine administration and vaccine certification. If you see the Indian certification, and actually I also have that vaccine report, it is quite good. We have a barcode, we have a unique UIHT number, we have an Aadhaar card number, we have a passport number and the government seal. So that is quite foolproof. Then why it is not accepted? Then that leads to the question, yes, certification should be done on a common platform, and what the data that has to be put into the certificate has to be equal globally, starting from the east to the west. And why have we not done it? And if we have not done it, it is the time to go and get it done. The data should be this.
Right.
Like in cancer treatment, SOPs and manufacturing of the vaccine, whether it's manufactured in US, Europe or in Asia. And similarly, they are all international companies which are in collaboration with India. Why not, and why we have not looked into it needs to be looked into to relieve this anxiety among people. Right. Because already we are suffering from the endemic with so many deaths and restrictions and economy being suffering. We should not suffer after taking a vaccine. And as much as I know, in the hospitals, I do see those who are already vaccinated with Covaxin, not much. It's not that they are getting infected. Right. There also a reported efficacy of 80 to 90%. So why? They all have the right to treatment and right to human rights here. It's the system is not in place and we are not together. Yes, we all need to sit together and see that the certification and the process of manufacturing and the particularly human rights is preserved, so that we do not discriminate.
Yes, I think that's very important, the point that you make about discrimination. Professor Polly Roy, I want to ask you, you clarified at the very outset that, there is no difference per se in the same vaccine being manufactured in different parts of the world. Why then has it taken the UK, for instance, or even other countries to accept India manufactured Covishield or the Europe manufactured AstraZeneca vaccine, Vaxrexvia? Why has it taken so long to accept these vaccines?
I think that mostly depends on the data generated after vaccination, how many people in this, because it's very important. Thorough studies of these vaccines are important. Even the manufacturing done of the same vaccine still have to be tested. And as far as my knowledge, that India have done quite well, and WHO accepted that. And UK also accept the vaccines. But all depends. You are thinking about that. Probably UK government do not accept the vaccine used in India, but that is not really correct. It is more, as you said, is a certification. India is a vast country. Different states may have different rules for certification. I think this sort of thing has to be openly discussed, that of what is the problem really. I'm sure it is nothing to do with the vaccine itself. It's nothing to do with the vaccine.
Dr. Gupta, don't you think? Right. No, it's very important. No, it's very important that you say it has nothing to do with the vaccines, because there is a centralized software, the CoWIN platform, on the basis of which vaccine dissemination in India is happening. Dr. Gupta, what would you like to say to those who have questions and doubts about the coronavirus vaccine as a result of these rules and regulations? Because it does, in a certain sense, fuel vaccine hesitancy, doesn't it? That the vaccine from India is not accepted, or Indians still need to quarantine despite vaccination. How do we counter that narrative?
Well, I'm not sure. Yes, I mean, there has been controversy about the AstraZeneca vaccine since the beginning, and I think that part of it was just because the studies that were conducted were slightly disorganized in some ways. I mean, they went for a multinational approach, which was great in that they tested the vaccine in different countries, but it also led to some, a more complex analysis and then, some issues, with reduced efficacy against variants, for example. But I think that as time has gone on, I think we've realized that actually the responses to that vaccine may actually be quite well prolonged, and therefore this is a potentially very good vaccine. So I think discriminating against vaccines in certain countries has an association with the AZ vaccine, but of course this is not a direct association, and it's one that people may make in their minds, but I'm not sure that they necessarily will. I think the sort of stigma around the AZ vaccine or Covishield is diminishing, in my view, globally. So I think that we shouldn't worry too much about that. Well,
one sincerely hopes it is diminishing, because, I mean, the vaccine has been approved in most parts of the world. The US and the UK have also approved Covishield. It's the certification process that one hopes will be universalized in order for, ease for at least international travelers and maybe some peace of mind as well. Thank you all very much for joining us.